Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Ben 23 Retrospectives. And today we're going to be discussing the 4th episode of Ben 10 Omniverse to feature Ben 23. It's a mad, mad, mad Ben world, part 1. And this episode begins as we see Ben as he's basically hunkering down in his house. He's locking the front door, closes the blinds, shuts off his phone, even shuts off the communicator in his watch. Why? Because he has the afternoon off, and he doesn't want to get interrupted. As such, he's just plopped himself down on the couch, got sumo slammers ready on the TV, and he's getting ready for just an afternoon of rest and relaxation. Yeah, that doesn't last. As no sooner does Ben start the game up, that who should appear in his living room but the Azimuth and Ben Tennyson of Dimension 23, with Azimuth looking like he's covered in a bit of goop. And what I love is that Azimuth doesn't even explain anything. It looks like he's about to, but then he just kind of goes, fuck it, and then just teleports away, leaving Ben 23 behind. So, yeah, what's going on? Well, what happened was that Ben 23 and Azimuth were duking it out with their world's version of Dr. Animo, or as he is called there, Dr. Vegetos, and apparently instead of mutating animals, he mutates vegetables, with his latest concoction being a carrot monster. And how Azimuth planned to defeat the monster was that he was going to synthesize a new brain from the creature that was supposed to make it, friendly, docile, just not a threat. But Ben 23 was impatient with that solution, since, well, it would have taken forever, so he just went upchuck and ate the thing with Azimuth still inside, and admittedly, yeah, he still spit Azimuth out because, well, he doesn't want to get rid of his mentor, but he still ate Azimuth, and let's just say that dealing with Ben 23 is kind of a full-time job, so Azimuth decided that he needed a vacation after that, and so he's just dropped Ben 23 off in the Prime timeline where he says he can be mentored by his Prime counterpart, while Azimuth basically goes back to his lab to clean himself off and get some well-deserved R&R. As such, Ben 23 is just stuck there, and Ben, really not seeing any reason to say no, or having any way of sending his Dimension 23 counterpart home, just kind of accepts it and invites him to play video games with him, which the pair of them do, as they just basically fill up the entire living room of Ben's house with smoothies and snacks and all that stuff. And we also learn that apparently Ben 23 does like the food at Mr. Euro's because he actually does because he's kind of craving some of that stuff. But as they go along through the game and get to the penultimate level, the beacon on Ben's Omnitrix begins beeping and eventually shocks Ben. Why? Well, because apparently Rook has been trying to contact Ben for hours and, well, since every form of communication has been cut off since Ben wanted to be undisturbed, he had to use Max's emergency frequency just to get through to Ben. And basically what he wants is that he needs Ben's help with thwarting a robbery, something that Ben thinks is a little dumb to use the emergency beacon for, but the reason why he wants Ben's help to thwart the robbery is because of who the robbers are. A pair of alien criminals by the name of Exoskull and Subdora. And if you recognize the name Exoskull, then congratulations, you watched the Ben 10,000 episode. He was that rhino guy that Ben encountered when he went to the future. And as for Subdora, she's a chameleon kind of alien and her species is, I'm sorry I'm gonna falter here, but her species is a chameleon kind of alien that was introduced in Ultimate Alien, with the first of these species being an alien prisoner who Ben sampled to get an alien called, well, chameleon. It's a whole thing. Point is, the pair of them are stealing from a watch repair store, and while Rook doesn't really know why they're stealing from this place. If they're stealing from this place, it's plumber business, and as such, Rook needs Ben's help. As such, Ben, thinking this is a perfect opportunity to mentor his Dimension 23 counterpart, he decides that they'll go out and deal with it, with them both going to their Omnitrixes and Ben accidentally turning into an alien called Walkatrout, who is basically just a tiny fish with tiny legs, who's almost next to useless except for the fact that he's slippery, and Ben 23 going Accelerate, or as he calls him, Speedy Quick, in order to try and get there faster. As such, the pair of Bens arrive on the scene as Rook is chasing them in his truck, and while they do end up missing the mark because Ben 23 is not used to there being no audience for his heroics, they do manage to reorient themselves as when both Bens return to their human forms, Ben goes goop, again accidentally, to try and fight Exoskull and Subdora, which does do the job for the most part until Subdora shoots at that little UFO thing that keeps goop in place, and that just causes goop to go spread all over the place and allowing the bad guys to get away with the equipment they stole. As such, Rook arrives on the scene just as Ben returns to normal, and after a quick introduction between Ben 23 and Rook Blanco, the heroes have to try and find a way to capture the bad guys, and thankfully, through dumb luck, they do have a way, as when Ben transformed back, not all of his goop disappeared, and as such, there was a good bit of goop that the bad guys walked through that left footprints for our heroes to follow, and as such, the trio of plumbers, well, duo of plumbers plus Ben 23 end up following the goop trail as it leads them to basically an abandoned warehouse in somewhere in Bellwood. And who should be in that warehouse but, of course, well, Exoskull and Subdora, as we see who's hired them to steal from the watch repair store. It's a Chronosapien, which, yeah, if you remember last week, Chronosapiens are clockwork species. Only this one looks not as pristine as clockwork. This Chronosapien is strapped to a table, and his armor is completely all black with red eyes, kind of a red interior, and he's clearly not in the best shape as he has wires hooked up to him, and he's missing that little cog on his head. This is actually an alien known as Maltruent, who is a rogue Chronosapien who I think made other appearances in Ben 10 Omniverse prior to this episode, at least just appearing in the background here and there. Again, you'd have to ask someone else about that who isn't me. Like I said, Omniverse was the series where I stopped watching, and the only reason I went back to watching it was just for the multiple Ben stuff. So unfortunately, if you want to get my opinion on Maltruent as a villain, I sadly have none, aside from the fact that he was involved with the Time War, which is a thing that was kind of shown off in the background of Omniverse every now and then. Point is, he's not doing so well, as apparently a side effect of the time when he first fought in the Time War, his body was disassembled and he's trying to reassemble himself. Hence why he wanted Maltruent wanted Subdora and Exoskull to steal the watch repair equipment. But since he's an alien and they're basically just low-level criminals, they needed someone who could actually, put all the pieces of him together in a rather competent fashion. And they found that someone, as from the shadows arrives another player on the scene. Hold on a second. Sorry about that, Chindy came in. But yeah, like I said, a new player enters the scene, and this one is, again, another villain. In this case, it is a cerebrocrustacean by the name of Dr. Psychobos, which, if you don't know what a cerebrocrustacean is, it's brainstorm species. Basically, Dr. Psychobos is, like Exoskull and Subdora, an Omniverse villain. Basically, in one of the earliest arcs of Ben 10 Omniverse, we were introduced to a device that was basically a counter for the Omnitrix called the Nematrix, which was actually created from blueprints of the Omnitrix that were stolen by another alien by the name of Malware, basically a rogue galvanic mechamorph. But either way, the Nematrix was basically supposed to contain the alien DNA of every alien species' predatory species, and like I said, it was basically meant to be a counter for the Omnitrix, as whatever alien Ben would transform into, the Nematrix could transform its user into that alien's counter species. The only problem was that because these aliens were predators from the get-go, their higher brain functions just weren't there, so no conscious being could use the Nematrix without having their brain basically get fried, which of course resulted in the Nematrix being wielded by a dog owned by a huntsman named Kyber, who I briefly mentioned before, but that's neither here nor there. But the thing is, the creator of the Nematrix was Dr. Psychobos himself, and he primarily created the Nematrix mostly because he wanted to stick it to Azimuth, as while I don't think that he and Azimuth ever had a personal beef, he thinks of himself as Azimuth's rival because Psychobos believes he's the smartest in the universe, and that a lowly Galvan like Azimuth does not deserve that title. And so he's pretty much made it his life's mission to want to destroy Azimuth and everything he stood for. So yeah, basically Psychobos is just a jealous dumbass. The thing is though, because he is still smart, he's still a genius, and as such, Maltruent thinks that while he can't get Azimuth to help him out because Azimuth's too smart to be evil, he can at least go for second best with Dr. Psychobos. However, before Dr. Psychobos can begin working on Maltruent, who should show up but Rook and the pair of Bens, who immediately jump into action to try and stop whatever's going on, with Ben accidentally going an alien called the Worst, who is literally a short yellow guy in underpants who really can't do anything, but he's completely invulnerable, meh. While Ben 23 goes Armadillo, which I realized I forgot to mention to talk about Armadillo in the last video, as Armadillo was actually one of the Andromeda aliens from Ben 10 Ultimate Alien, which also makes you wonder how Ben 23 has him. For those that don't know, the Andromeda aliens were aliens that were from outside the Milky Way galaxy, meaning that like Blitzwolfer, Snarrow, Frankenstrike, and another alien introduced in Omniverse called Vampire, the Andromeda aliens' DNA was not originally in the Omnitrix. It had to be sampled when Ben made contact with them during Ultimate Alien. So it kind of makes me wonder how Ben 23 has him. I'm going to assume that the excuse is that after Ben 23 began getting mentored by Azimuth, Azimuth probably took him to these places and they encountered these aliens, and so Ben 23 was able to sample their DNA into his Omnitrix. Otherwise, I have no idea why they're there. Although his armadillo has blue armor instead of yellow, so that's kind of cool. Point is, but either way, I'm getting off topic. I'm talking about things from other shows. Point is, I gotta focus on this episode. Either way, Ben's go alien, fight ensues. And of course, Ben 23 and Rook are the ones primarily doing all the heavy lifting, while Ben himself can't really do much because the worst can't do anything besides take a hit, and even then it still hurts. However, since Ben is one that can actually improvise, he actually does, and he tells his Dimension 23 counterpart to just launch him right at Exoskull before he can shoot something out of his horn, before he can shoot an energy beam out of his horn. And which he does, as Ben actually manages to get himself jammed in the horn, which causes it to jam up and cause an explosion that sends Exoskull back and sends Ben flying. Unfortunately, Exoskull ends up kind of knocking into Dr. Psychobos and Maltruin and ends up activating this chronodial in Maltruin's chest. And unfortunately, this is the component in Maltruin that allows him to control time, and Dr. Psychobos said that should not have been activated. And as a result, Maltruin basically releases an explosion of chronal energy that completely encompasses the area, and it causes pretty much everyone to black out. And by the time everyone wakes up, things are not so well. As we cut to later with Prime Ben and Ben 23, as they are in the remains of what looks like Bellwood, much to Ben's horror, although Ben 23 is being a callous prick because he thinks, hey, it's not my Bellwood, why should I care? But it's clear that things aren't right, because while both Bens are okay, where are the bad guys? Where's Rook? If Bellwood was destroyed, then they would at least see something there. As such, the pair of Bens end up going off on their way to try and figure out what's going on, and it's clear that it's clear the more they walk around that this might not be the Bellwood that either Ben knows, because they end up running into another one of those Ben 10 Omniverse side characters who only existed for comic relief. In this case, this little alien called Pakmar, with the running gag with Pakmar being that every time he and Ben cross paths, Ben ends up ruining one of his businesses, and for some reason he never sues the little brat, but what do I know? However, this time, Pakmar's more than happy to see Ben, and even offers the pair of Bens a glass of water, saying that he has to thank them for giving him the basically monopoly on all the water in the region, and which does confuse Prime Ben. But when he and his Dimension 23 counterpart gulp down the water, they're shocked at just how good it is, to the point where they end up hunting for a silo and then just gorge themselves on water to the point where they end up getting fat. However, as they do this, a truck ends up pulling up to them, and well, from the truck comes Rook. Only Rook looks a little different, which, by the way, I realized just now I didn't give a proper introduction to Rook. He's a plumber who is assigned as Ben's partner, and he's a plumber who is assigned as Ben's partner. He's basically the straight man to Ben's antics. Okay, the introduction over. Either way, this Rook is not the same Rook that we saw before, as this one clearly looks like he was ripped right out of a Mad Max movie with weird headwear, a shawl, and having a rougher personality altogether. As he sees the pair of Bens gorging on the water and asks what the hell they're doing, until he sees that they're both Ben, at which point he just grovels before them and just wants apologies, which again confuses the pair of Bens. But then it's made clear that this is not the right Rook, as they look back at his truck and we see where the other bad guys are. So we see Dr. Psychobos, Exoskull, Subdor, and Maltruin there, as Maltruin lets Rook know that these guys are not the person he thinks these people are not the people he thinks they are, at which point Rook calls them imposters, kicks dirt in their faces, and then gets back in the truck and leaves. As such, it's clear that the Bens really desperately need answers, and so the pair of them go alien to try and get to where Rook was driving to, which in this case was this giant gorge that's in the ground, where we see a bunch of people in gear working with various machines and pickaxes to dig into the ground. As such, when the pair of Bens arrive, at first they're accosted by this world's version of Will Harang, which again, if you haven't seen my look at the first episode of Ultimate Alien, he's basically Ben's equivalent of J. Jonah Jameson, who immediately tells them they need to get back to work. But the instant both Bens return to normal, Will Harang and his and his entourage basically all bow to Ben, calling him their boss, and Ben 23 his little brother. While Ben wants to play along with this because clearly something's going on and they need to get answers, they end up getting interrupted as one of the machines, a giant drill, begins malfunctioning and almost crushes several people that are inside the gorge. As such, the pair of Bens go alien, with Ben 23 going Spider Monkey, yes, and Ben Prime going an alien called Bullfrag. He's basically an incursion. Ben unlocked him during the Incursion War storyline that made me drop this show. And the pair of Bens are able to save the workers, but they're not enough to stop the drill. And thankfully, though, that's when Rook arrives on the scene and stops the drill. But he didn't stop it because he wanted to help the Bens or even save the people. It's because his boss told him that they needed to move it. As such, once both Bens meet back up with Rook, they revert back to their human forms. Ben Prime wants to know who exactly this boss is that Rook is talking about. And Rook steps aside as the boss comes on the scene alongside the villains from Ben's dimension. If you couldn't tell by the setting and the way people are revering Ben and Ben 23, their boss is Mad Ben. This is his timeline, which again, kind of obvious. It's a Mad Max inspired world. Of course, the Ben that looked like he was from a Mad Max post-apocalyptic world would be from this world. Hey, he's the one in charge, and he's unfortunately working with the bad guys. As such, Ben thinks that they can easily take this guy because, well, they beat him before, but Mad Ben immediately makes it clear that he's not going to go down without a fight as he goes to his Omnitrix, goes Diamond Head, and starts fighting the Bens. And unfortunately, they can only do so much to fight him. I mean, they both go alien. I mean, I think they both end up going alien, but unfortunately, this is Mad Ben's environment, and he's got the home team, and he's got the home field advantage. And eventually, when both Bens are reverted to normal, he ends up trapping both of them in shards of diamond. As such, this leads us back to Maltruin and Co. You see, the thing is, like I said, Mad Ben is working with the bad guys from Ben's dimension, but the reason, and which is why he's getting all of these people that work for him to dig into the ground. But the thing is, the reason why they're digging into the ground is because they're actually looking for a piece of Maltruant. Remember how I said that Maltruant was missing that cog on his head that Clockwork typically has? Well, that cog is a key, and that's the final piece that Maltruant needs to fully regain access to his time powers. As with that piece in mind, he can re-enter the time stream, take control of time, and as he puts it, restart the time war, which it's again whole thing. What's the whole thing? I'm not going to get into it. It's not important for this episode. As such, he's basically he's taken on Mad Ben as his mentee, and what I kind of like is that we see a bit more of Mad Ben's personality here, as apparently, while he may be a tough guy who likes to flex his power all over the place, he also apparently does hold some loyalty to anyone that takes him on, and he apparently has reverence for Vilgax, and now he even has reverence for Maltruin, and is willing to do whatever he wants, which I have a personal theory about that. I'll get to it when I finish the plot summary. But point is, both Bens immediately, or Prime Ben at least, realizes that there's a way to get under Mad Ben's skin as he begins bad-mouthing Maltruant right to his face. As such, Mad Ben gets frustrated and attacks him, which Ben is able to duck behind, but it ends up breaking the diamonds that Mad Ben used to trap him. At which point, Ben tricks him into freeing Ben 23, and before Mad Ben can mount a counterattack, Ben goes Clockwork and ends up blasting at Mad Ben, and reverting him back to his human form and freezing him in time. Basically, what he did was that, as he puts it, he turned him back in time before he used his Omnitrix and froze him there. Unfortunately, though, this effect is only going to last for so long, so Ben knows that if Maltruant wants that key, it's going to be bad news. As such, both Bens realize they have to stop him from getting the key, and to give them an extra edge in finding it, Ben talks his Dimension 23 counterpart into going Upgrade, or as he calls him, Electric Bubble, and has him merge with him, since Clockwork is a mechanical alien, and with Clockwork's powers upgraded, it allows Ben to zero in on where the key is and dig it out. Unfortunately, this soon leads to a game of keep away as Exoskull and Subdora try getting the key away from Ben, but as Ben is fighting with them, Mad Ben ends up unfreezing and re-enters the fray, and I admit, I kind of like that we see a little bit of Ben's creativity here, as while he doesn't end up going alien to help Subdora or Exoskull, he does take advantage of everything. he does take advantage of everything, as once the key ends up accidentally getting flung to Ben, Mad Ben arrives on the scene, actually jumps off of Ben's back and grabs the key. It's, again, pretty smart stuff. It's not good because he's working for the bad guys, but hey, just little things like that to remind you that he's still Ben are just nice. I like it. Either way, Mad Ben ends up throwing the key to Dr. Psychobos, who gives it to Maltruant, and so once Maltruant pops it into his head, his power is restored. As such, Psychobos, his duty fulfilled, asks, "Hey, can I get my reward now?" And Maltruant says, "Of course he can get his reward. He gives him eternal youth." At which point he tries blasting at him with energy rays, which, yeah, it's clear that if the rays hit him, they turn him into a baby. Something that's showcased as the Will Harang of this world starts immediately offering reverence to Mad Ben, their boss, only for him to get hit by a time ray and turn into a baby. He is not going to last a week. Either way, Psychobos manages to run away, saying that he can send him the bill. And as such, Maltruant decides that he's pretty much done with this dimension. As he basically jumps down, and while Ben tries using his upgraded time powers to fight Maltruant ends up overpowering him and ends up blasting both Bens, reverting them back to their human forms. As such, they both try to go for their Omnitrices, which that's apparently the plural for Omnitrixes, so I'm an idiot. But like I said, either way, Ben and Ben 23 try going for their Omnitrices to fight Maltruant, but their watches aren't working, as apparently Maltruant uses time powers to basically freeze them and render them useless. As such, Maltruant tells Mad Ben to do whatever the hell he wants with them, because at some point it's not going to matter anymore, at which point he opens up a portal and leaves this dimension, taking Subdora and Exoskull with him. As such, with Ben and Ben 23 powerless, Mad Ben goes for his Omnitrix, goes upchuck, and begins chasing after them, while the pair of Bens try ducking behind a pile of garbage alongside Dr. Psychobos. It ultimately doesn't end well, as Mad Ben ends up eating the pile of garbage, and the last thing we see in this episode is him shooting out a giant spit wad right in everybody's face before we cut to the credits. So there you go. Also, I remember what aliens that Ben and Ben 23 used to fight Mad Ben before. It was Cannonbolt and an alien called Jury Rig. It's basically a little gremlin that has a mad fixation on disassembling and reassembling technology. I feel good about myself. But anyway, that's neither here. But either way, that's all well and good. What do I think of this episode? Honestly, as a first part, I like it. Again, I can't really give my full thoughts on it because ultimately the story's incomplete. It's unlike the last two-parter. This one shows right away that it's an incomplete story. After all, it's a Mad Ben World Part 1. So that means there's a Part 2 in there. So I'll save my full thoughts on this two-parter until after I've watched that. But as the first parts go, I think this is good. It's just the first half of the story, but it does a good job at setting everything up. For starters, I like once again that we see Ben and Ben 23 working together on this one. And obviously, I'm gonna look at it because, well, the vlogs are called the Ben 23 Retrospectives, so of course I'm gonna look at any episode that features Ben 23. But what I like about the episode right from the get-go is that in a strange way, this episode's kind of the inverse of the Store 23 episode, at least in the first half. Remember, the whole gimmick with Store 23 was that Ben and co wound up getting sent to another universe, and Ben wound up crossing paths with him of that world, and just kind of seeing how things operated in Dimension 23, how the version of him in that world developed because of the changes in his timeline. It was interesting, and I liked seeing that. And ultimately, the episode itself was about helping Ben 23 get out of his own way and learn to actually be a better person. It was also just as much a fish out of water story. As, despite the Bellwood of Dimension 23 looking similar to the one that Ben knew, it operated on slightly different rules, especially in regards to Ben. As Ben 23 in that world was this big famous conglomerate that everyone just looked forward to, and everybody loved whenever he did his hero work. So to have the opposite occur in the first half of this episode, I kind of like. Now, unfortunately, we don't get much of a fish out of water story for Ben 23 in this case, because unfortunately the most we get out of him feeling like he's in unfamiliar territory is when he was accelerated and rushed to try and help stop Exoskull and Subdora, and then freaked out because there was no crowds, no audiences, and no cameras there to watch his heroics, which resulted in him kind of getting getting surprise attacked and knocked into an alley, which resulted in Ben giving him his first lesson and saying that they had to do the hero stuff even if no one was watching. As again, that's what being a hero is. So I at least like that. It's just, but unfortunately, we don't get a lot more of that. As from there on out. Ben 23 is just a part of the team, which I'm okay with. I like seeing Ben 23 there. It's just that I feel like it would have been kind of cool to see him as a fish out of water story. With that said, the story we are presented with him is still a nice bit of is still in many ways a character development story. And I would be lying if I said that seeing him and his prime counterpart work off each other was not fun. It's still really nice. And I love that the first thing that both Bens do when they're in the same room together is just play video games. Again, going back to how I liked seeing Mad Ben be creative in battle when he jumped off of Ben as Clockwork to grab the key as it was being thrown to them. It's nice to get little reminders that these other people are indeed alternate versions of Ben. And likewise, when Ben 23 and Prime Ben are just sitting on their asses playing sumo slammers, it's a nice little reminder that they are the same person, as they're both just kind of laid back, goofy, more concerned with the video games. In fact, the drive that we see Ben 23 display is very similar to the drive we've seen from younger Ben when he's been playing video games. And quite frankly, I like that. I think it's enjoyable. And the idea of just two different versions of Ben just sitting there and deciding, hey, let's play some video games, I think it's just enjoyable. Hell, a gag that I actually thought was funny in the opening prologue for the episode was that when Ben 23 and Ben were playing video games, we saw the snacks piling up. At one point, they just had beers and they were having trouble with a level. And it's like, hey, we still having trouble with this level? It's like, yeah, and these beards didn't help anything. Last time I listened to anything online and we see their fake beards. I don't know, it's enjoyable. I like that. I like the little stupid shit like that. That's enjoyable. And it works all well off their characters. From there, though, the interactions between them throughout the episode are really nice. Again, Ben 23 is still showcased to be an alternate version of Ben, as a lot of his mannerisms in battle are stuff that we've seen from Ben. He still has the same fighting prowess and tact that his prime counterpart has, as he's able to still adapt to the situation, is actually able to fight the bad guys and actually do a good job. Plus, we actually see him bust out the "It's Hero Time" line at least a couple times in the episode, and it's as natural to Ben 23 as it is to the Prime Ben, and it's great. I love it. I also like that while this episode of Omniverse does kind of poke fun at Prime Ben the same way the Omniverse likes to do, they at least do show Ben as being more competent in this episode. And quite frankly, I like the episodes in Omniverse where Prime Ben is shown to be competent, because again, if I can get into a complaint with the Ben 10 franchise as a whole, it's that from season 3 of Alien Force onward, they tried overemphasizing how much of a doofus he was. So to actually showcase Ben being smart and actually intelligent, it's nice. The most we got of him being poked fun of in this episode was when he accidentally left a trail of goop that allowed him, Rook, and Ben 23 to track down the bad guys. Which, yeah, that was dumb luck, but it's also but in my opinion, it's a side effect of Ben actually making lemonade out of lemons, because the thing is, Goop was an accidental transformation. When he went Goop, he was trying to tell his Dimension 23 counterpart that when fighting big guys like Exoskull, they need strong, sturdy aliens that can withstand him. And, well, the payoff for that joke is that he ends up going Goop, but he takes advantage of the situation and actually utilizes his abilities to the best of his abilities. And I like that. It's nice. I mean, yeah, he still gets beaten when Subdora shot his UFO, but again, that wasn't really due to his incompetence. It's just the bad guys being smart. So again, I like that. And even when Ben wound up going the worst, when he Ben 23 and Rook wound up attacking Dr. Psychobos and Co. in the abandoned warehouse, he was still being smart, as he realized, oh yeah, I'm invulnerable. I can use this, and had Ben 23 launch him at the bad guys and jam up Exoskull's laser horn. That's again smart, intelligent thinking. And I like that Ben and honestly, while we do still get some jabs with Ben, he is acting competent as Ben 23's mentor, as he's taking note of the situation, figuring out what pieces of the puzzle fit and which ones don't, and while still trying to put his best foot forward as a hero. As when he and Ben 23 arrive at the dig site for all of Mad Ben's flunkies, they're of course trying to get as much intelligence as possible, but then the instant both Ben see danger afoot, they both just go alien and try to help the good guys. It's nice. And again, it's another example of seeing that Ben 23 is an alternate Ben because he actually did choose the proper alien for the job, in this case, Spider Monkey, and then likewise, when he went Cannonbolt later to fight Mad Ben when he was Diamond Head, he was actually holding himself well, and while Ben wound up getting stuck as jury rig, he at least said, well, at least you're a smaller target, while he knew he was going to take the brunt of the fire. And of course, Ben worked with what he had as he went through a pile of junk that was lying around and managed to make a gun that shot out giant things of metal, giant metal chunks. I don't know. It's weird. The point is, character-wise, it's the episode is actually strong for Ben and again, yeah, Ben 23, and their interactions are good. As while you can still recognize Ben 23 and Prime Ben as being two variants of the same guy, you can still see the differences in their demeanors. Yeah, they're both competent heroes and can actually complement each other well. But whereas Prime Ben is definitely trying to take note of a situation and trying to figure out what's going on, Ben 23 is very lax about this whole thing, treating it as the next adventure of Ben 23 and all that crap. Kind of being acting blasé when they thought that they wound up accidentally nuking Ben's Bellwood, and likewise still being more concerned with the dumb alien names. But again, I'm not going to give a notch towards Ben 23. He's still clearly showcasing Ben's heroic spirit, especially since he went Spider Monkey to go and save the people that are almost crushed by a drill. But again, so I like that. It's just that you can tell the difference in their demeanors, and it's nice seeing them work off of each other. It's nice. I dig it. And likewise, again, I like that we got to revisit with one of the alternate Bens that we saw in the And Then There Were None / And Then There Was Ben two-parter. What if I can give another complaint to that two-parter, which it's a minor complaint, mind you, since the focus of that story was more on No Watch Ben's tale and how he reacted to the weirdness around him, so I kind of didn't notice. One of the problems that I kind of had, which I consider more a nitpick, was that we never really got to learn more of the stories of all of the alternate Bens from Vilgax's side. Now, again, it wasn't a primary complaint because, like I said, that two-part was more focused on No Watch Ben and his story and how he was reacting to all the strange stuff around him, which I know I just said, but hear me out here. And so seeing these other Bens was just kind of more like a cute Easter egg. But at the same time, one of the things that I love with alternate universes is learning more of what makes them tick, seeing what goes into each world and makes them the way that they are. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to do these vlogs, because one, I love Ben 10, but having the excuse of looking at these episodes because Ben 23 is a character allows me to note the differences between Ben and these other versions of himself. In the Store 23 episode, we got to note those differences when Ben was stuck in Dimension 23 and had to work alongside his counterpart there, which did allow for some good character stuff because Ben 23 was basically what Ben could have become had Grandpa Max not been there to offer him mentorship. And likewise, in Then There Were None / And Then There Was Ben two-parter, we got that again in the form of No Watch Ben, as we saw a version of the events where Ben never got the Omnitrix and just what kind of a person he would have become in those series of events, as well as seeing that Ben grow into his own when he was presented with a chance to be a hero. Again, it's good stuff that definitely scratches that itch for alternate universes for me. But when we got to see it, and while I understand why we couldn't look into the stories of all the other Bens, because if we did, then the episode would have been over-bloated and would have lost focus, at the same time, seeing all those other Bens in that two-parter definitely made you curious about their stories and made you want to know what the heck happened to them. Now, admittedly, the Bens on the good guy side didn't have that as much, because Gwen 10, again, even if she wasn't the version of Gwen from the Gwen 10 episode, you could still easily assume what her story was. Ben 23 we had already seen before in Store 23, and Ben 10,000... it's obvious. It's future Ben. What do you know? No, but as for the Bens on the bad guy side, again, it makes you wonder what their stories are. With the two most interesting variants being Ben Zaro and Mad Ben. I especially want to know Ben Zaro's story because he is a zombie in his universe, and according to Word of God, apparently there's a zombie plague in his reality. So it just kind of makes you wonder what the circumstances surrounding that Ben story are, and why he has an Omnitrix stitched into his straitjacket. Was it given to him? Did he find it like every other Ben? Was it something they incorporated in there to try and help him out? Is he truly evil, or is he just stupid and went along with Vilgax's plan because it was easier for Vilgax to do it? I really don't know. I really don't know, but I would love to know. I would love to know his story, especially since he recognized Gwen and still called her a dweeb. But I'm willing to. I like that we are getting that a bit more of that with Mad Ben in his universe. Now, admittedly though, if I can give another complaint, this episode doesn't really do much to kind of expand on the world lore, believe it or not. No, don't get me wrong. I do like that we get to see Mad Ben's world. In fact, one of the things that I like is that when you really get a sense of Mad Ben and how he fits into his world, you really get the sense that this is a place that was kind of screwed over at several points. Like going back to it, while we see the remains of Bellwood scattered around this place, it's with Mad Ben basically at the top of the metaphorical food chain. He's basically made it his playground, even to the point where he's renamed the place Benwood, as we see a sign that says "Welcome to Bellwood" in the remains, and he's basically just drawn over the two L's and connected them to make it look like an N. So it's Benwood now. So yeah. But in a way, when you really get a look at this world, it does give you an impression of why Mad Ben would be the way he is. Let's play a game. Let's kind of play a thought experiment here. Let's say that Mad Ben's world had been destroyed at some point when he was still a kid, because Mad Ben clearly is used to this world, and of course, and 9 times out of 10, if you want to kind of zero in on when a Ben in the multiverse found the Omnitrix, it's usually back when they were kids. So you could argue that this Ben probably grew up in this post-apocalyptic dystopia, and he probably had a hard time. After all, in a post-apocalyptic world, it's usually survival of the fittest, and so Ben probably had to do whatever he could to survive. He had to be tougher, he had to be meaner, but the thing is, like Ben 23, Mad Ben probably did not have any mentorship. He probably didn't have a Grandpa Max in this timeline. Odds are, in this reality, Max was either off planet or he was just straight up dead, and as such, Mad Ben never really had the opportunity to, actually have a mentor, someone to teach him the right and wrong of the world, and all he knew was the rule of survival. Then enter the Omnitrix, and suddenly Mad Ben has a tool that puts him high above everybody else. He can use the Omnitrix to intimidate, to basically coerce, and just get whatever the hell he wants. And then likewise, he does end up getting mentors. He mentioned Vilgax at one point, which, whether he's referring to the prime timeline Vilgax or his own realities of Vilgax, I have no idea. But regardless, Vilgax is probably one of the first people to actually show something akin to kindness to him. Again, akin to kindness. Vilgax is not a kind person. He's nuts. The closest we've ever seen to kindness is with Vilgaxia, which I still think was stupid. Otherwise, Vilgax is not a nice person, and even if he tolerated this other Ben, all Vilgax would see when he looked at Mad Ben is the same kid that's been fucking his shit up for years now. But again, regardless of whether the Vilgax that Mad Ben mentored under was his timeline's own Vilgax or the prime timeline's Vilgax, this was someone that definitely taught Ben, that Ben probably looked up to, and it's probably why he still offers reverence to Maltruant, even though he's technically the top dog in his reality, because Maltruant also took him under his wing. And going back to how Ben ultimately does kind of need someone to look out for him and keep him on the right path, Mad Ben probably needs someone to help keep him on the strong path. And if we operate under the presumption that Mad Ben was mentored by his world's Vilgax, you could argue that this world's Vilgax found Mad Ben probably sometime after he found the Omnitrix, took him in, and likewise taught him everything he knew, which resulted in Mad Ben getting tougher and learning more how to utilize the Omnitrix. It would also probably explain why he has the Omniverse-style Omnitrix, as, yeah, while there are differences between it and the prime timeline Omnitrix, like I said, spikes, and it has spikes, and it has an orange coloring for the dial instead of a green one. Again, the fact that he has that at all does mean that at some point he had to swap out Omnitrixes. So you could argue that Vilgax probably assisted him in that regard, either by helping him build the Omnitrix himself or by intimidating the azimuth of this timeline, which actually would explain why there are aliens in this world. Because if Mad Ben with Vilgax's assistance began taking his influence to the stars to the point where he was able to get a brand new Omnitrix, then you could argue that they probably brought some aliens back down to Earth with them just for Mad Ben to rule over. Which I'm surprised that I actually got all that from my theory. I know, it's weird, right? Yeah, whatever. Point is, there is a lot to be. Point is, it's speculation, which I admit. So I have no solid theories for that. But it's an interesting theory, in my opinion. Again, it could be wrong. It could be wrong. Again, this is just kind of me pulling stuff out of my ass. But the point is, Point is, you kind of get a sense of why Mad Ben would probably have some reverence for Maltruin and Vilgax, as again, he grew up in a dystopian reality where no one was probably there for him. And then likewise, after getting the Omnitrix, people are telling him, here's what you can do with it. And thus, while he still considers himself the top banana and expects everyone else to just do whatever the hell he wants them to, he basically still offers reference to the people that actually helped get him to where he is. So I kind of like that. It's just that again, a lot of the stuff is still speculation. The episode doesn't really do a lot to explain it. With that said, though, like I said, the episode doesn't do a good job to explain it, because otherwise, why are there aliens on Earth if Earth is a crap hole? Why would they willingly come here? Again, only explanation. I think the explanation would be if Ben brought them from the stars himself. So I don't know. But the point is this. Point is this. While I do wish we had a bit more world building in Mad Ben's part, even though I probably gave proper explanations for why his world is the way it is, but again, that's kind of me kind of pulling all this shit out of nowhere. At the same time, I do like seeing Mad Ben in his environment. I like seeing him as a top dog. I like seeing him clashing with his other selves, which again, going back to the chemistry that we've seen with Prime Ben and Ben 23, it's nice to see them work off of Mad Ben. As again, you can tell that Mad Ben is a variant of Ben. He has a bit of Ben's recklessness. He has a bit of Ben's creativity, and in a way, he has his flair for improvisation. It's just that again, this Ben grew up in a world where he had to be the top dog, and now because of the people like Maltruin and Vilgax, he's basically revels in being the top dog and just acting like a complete jackass to people just because he can be a jackass, which I like. I do actually like that. So to see him once again come back as an antagonist, it's some good shit. And like I said, with how the two-parter ends on a cliffhanger with both Ben and Ben 23 losing access to their Omnitrices and basically being attacked and basically being subdued by their evil counterpart who still has an Omnitrix that works. It ultimately does lead to an interesting first part of the episode. Again, it's an incomplete story in and of itself, but from what we're presented, it is some good stuff. While I would like to have had more of a fish out of water story with Ben 23 and him having to get used to all this weird stuff, at the same time, what we are presented with is fine. I like seeing Ben 23 and working off a Prime Ben. I like seeing Prime Ben having to take charge and actually being a rather competent hero and doing a good job of it. I like seeing the stuff within. I liked us visiting Mad Ben's world and setting up what the big threat is with Mad Ben and co. I liked seeing the Bens working together and kicking ass. I liked seeing the cliffhanger and how it ended. I liked seeing the people that we're familiar with in the Prime timeline interpreted in this timeline, even if I am questioning how some of them got there, even though I presented a theory, but again, pulling out of my ass. Point is, while the episode is definitely incomplete, as a beginning of this two-parter, it does its job well. It keeps you interested in the story, makes you want to see where things go, and on the whole, maybe not a great episode. Well, actually, I think it is a great episode. I think it's a great episode. Not very great, but definitely great in its own regard. It's enjoyable. It's an enjoyable episode is what I can say. It is enjoyable in what it does, and quite frankly, I did enjoy myself while watching the episode, and if I wasn't doing this weekly, I would be happily popping up the next episode to see what happens next, even though I already know what happens next, I've seen these before, but hey, that's neither here nor there. Point is, it's a good first part, and I look forward to part 2 next week, so I think that's really all I have to say. If you were able to tolerate my incoherent babbling, I thank you. And, tune in next week as we not only look at the second part of this two-parter, but we finally wrap up the Ben 23 retrospective. So till then, I hope you have a good Friday, and take care.